So in this video, we're going to take a look at changing the subject, and we're going to start with two step ones. Now, to get the most out of this video, you need to make sure that you are paying attention when I'm going through the ones on the left-hand side, and more importantly, you are pausing the video and you're taking the time to answer the questions on the right-hand side, and then pressing the play to see how you get on. That's how you're going to get the most out of this video. If you just sit and watch it, you're not going to get as much out of it. Right, let's get started because we've got quite a few that we're going to get through. So when I'm going through these, I'm going to make n the subject. What I'm trying to imagine is, if I was to substitute a value in for n, what's the first thing that I would do to it? So if I was to put n in as a 5, the first thing that I would do is I would be multiplying that by 2. Then, whatever the answer to that is, I would be taking away 3 from it. To change the subject, we're essentially having to work backwards through that list. So I'm going to have to get rid of that take away 3. To do that, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So y plus 3 is equal to 2n. And then I'm going to have to, again, undo that multiply by 2. So the opposite, the inverse of that is going to be divide by 2. And when I'm dividing by 2 and I've got two terms, I just write it as one big fraction. Now, that there is enough to get you full marks because the subject is the thing that's on its own. So having the n on its own is the target here, so that's it now done. However, it is good practice to have the subject on the left-hand side of your equation. So what we do is we just write it the other way around. Now, I've got one on the right-hand side for you to try, so please press pause. And then once you have tried the question, then press play to see how you get on. So the first thing that I'm going to do to it is I'm going to multiply by 5, and then I'm going to take away 2. So I'm going to work backwards through that. So I'm going to do the opposite each time. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. That'll be y plus 2 is equal to 5n. Then I'm going to do the opposite times by 5. So that's divide by 5. So I write it as a fraction, and then I flip it round. So y plus 2 all over 5. So every time that I'm doing this, I'm listing the operations that act on that subject, or the thing I'm trying to make the subject. So here it's always going to be n. Once I've listed them, I'm then going backwards through that list, unpicking as I do it. So I'm always doing the inverse of what's in my list. And then I'm just rewriting it with my n, or my new subject, on the left-hand side. Right. Now, the more variations we can see of this, the more confident we can be with what's going to come up. So again, let's try another one. So please make sure you're watching. So here, if I was to substitute in for n, first thing I would do is I would times it by 2, and then I'm going to take away an a squared for it. So let's go backwards. I'm going to add a squared to both sides. Sorry, that's a 2. It's got a little bit of a tip on its head. And then I'm timesing by 2 on both sides. So the opposite, that's going to be a divide by 2. So y plus a squared divided by 2. So again, write it with the n on the left-hand side, y plus a squared all over 2. Again, pause the video. There's one for you on the right-hand side to try. Then press play to see how you get on. So here, I would, if I'm subbing in for n, I would be timesing by 5, and then I'd be taking away a squared. So to unpick that take away an a squared, I'm going to have to add the a squared to both sides, and then I'm going to have to divide by the 5. So again, I'm always doing the opposite. And by doing the opposite, I'm making sure that that n is going to end up on its own. And the order, listing them, tells me the order that I need to kind of do them in the opposite of to work backwards through. So next one. Now, here, if I was to sub in for that n, the first thing I would do is in that bracket. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is take away 3. And then whatever that answer is, I'm going to times by 2. So to work backwards through it, I'm going to have to divide by 2 first. And then I'm going to have to add 3. Now the add 3 is on the outside of the y divided by 2 fraction, because I'm not halving the 3. That is being added across, or added to both sides, after I've divided that y by 2. So it doesn't go in the same fraction. And again, just like before, I write it with the n on the left-hand side. One for you to try. Please, again, make sure, pause the video, take as long as you need, then press play to see how you get on. So here I would take away 2 first, then I'd times by 5. So let's work backwards through it. I'm going to divide by 5 onto both sides. Okay, I don't really need that bracket anymore. okay, because it's not being multiplied by anything, so actually it's better practice to take the bracket away. So I'm left with n minus 2, and then I need to add 2 to both sides. Again, it doesn't go into the fraction, and I flip it round, y divided by 5 plus 2. Again, we're starting to build up this repertoire of the different ways that we can see these things. So in this case, the first thing I would do is I would half the n, so I would divide it by 2, and then I would be taking away 3. So let's go backwards. So the inverse of taking away 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and then I'm going to need to times by 2. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do it. The way that I prefer is to leave it as a bracket, okay? So I can leave it as the 2 is going to multiply the y plus the 3. You can expand the bracket if you want. You're not going to get any extra thing or any extra marks for it, okay? And I rearrange it, so 2y plus 3. So you could, okay? And again, I would leave it there. However, you could expand it and say that that's 2y plus 6, okay? But I would always recommend just leaving it as a bracket. And then the next one, again, here, one for you to try. Please press pause, take as long as you need, then press play to check. Again, I cannot stress enough, you'll get more out of this video if you're sitting there with a pen and paper and you are trying these as we go through them, okay? You're going to divide by 3 first, then you're going to add the 4. So I'm going to go backwards through it. So I'm going to take away the 4 from both sides first, and then I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. Again, I'm multiplying 2 terms on the left-hand side by 3, so I'm creating that bracket. And then I flip it around, 3 multiplied by y, take away 4 in the bracket. Again, let's have another one. So this time here, first I would take away 3, and then I would divide by 2. So I'm going to work backwards through it. So I'm going to times by both sides by 2. Now that I've done that, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Again, always doing the inverse or the opposite of what's happening. That way it unpicks itself. And so I rearrange it again so that it ends on the left-hand side. One for you to try on the right-hand side. So again, here, you're going to be adding 4, and then you're going to be dividing by 3. So we're going to work backwards. So the last thing you did was divide by 3, so we're going to get rid of that first. We're going to times both sides by 3, and then I'm going to take away 4 from both sides. So n is going to be 3y, take away 4. Again, another one. So this time, I'm actually going to be squaring n, and then I'm going to be adding 1. So let's work backwards through it. So first thing is I'm going to take away 1 from both sides. So that will leave me with y take away 1 equals n squared. Now, the inverse of squaring is square rooting. So I need to square root both sides here to be left with n on its own. And when I square root the left-hand side, the square root covers everything that is there. Okay, so it covers the y and it covers the 1. You need to make sure that you are clear in showing that it covers all of it. And then I write it back the way around, and again, notice I am clear in showing that it covers everything. Okay, you're better erring on the safe side and making it go too far than kind of half covering the 1. Okay, you're far better showing that it clearly covers it. Right, again, 1 on your side. Please pause the video, take as long as you need to do it. So here we're going to cube it, and then we're going to take away 2. So let's go backwards. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. That's going to be equal to n cubed. So I'm going to take the cube root of both sides. And so n is going to be the cube root of y plus 2. Again, please clearly show that it is covering the y plus 2. It's covering both of them. A few more to go. Again, now we're starting to see the squares. We're starting to see some new notation here. So first of all, here I would add 1, and then I would square it. So I'm going to go back the way. So first of all, I'm going to square root. So square root y equals n plus 1. I no longer need that bracket because I'm no longer squaring it. And then the opposite of adding 1, or the inverse of adding 1, is taking away 1. So square root of y take away 1 equals n. Now notice, when I did the square root, the only thing on the left-hand side was a y. So when I'm taking away 1 later on, that doesn't get square rooted. It doesn't go underneath the square root with the y. It stays on the outside. And then I rewrite it, again clearly showing that that time the 1 isn't underneath my square root because I subtracted it from both sides after I square rooted both sides. Here, the first thing, again, please pause the video, take as long as you need. But here, press play to see how you got on. Here, take away 2 first, then I'm going to cube. So when working backwards, I'm going to cube root both sides. And I don't need the bracket anymore. Then I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So n is going to be the cube root of y, add 2. Again, clearly showing that they are separate. The cube root doesn't cover the 2. Here I'm squaring first, and then I am dividing by 4. So working backwards, I'm going to times by 4 on both sides, and then I'm going to square root. So n is going to be the square root of 4y. One for you to try. Again, press pause, take it as long as you need. So here I'm cubing, and then I'm going to be dividing by 5. So I'm going to times both sides by 5 first, and then I will cube root both sides. So I'll be left with n is equal to the cube root of 5y. What have we got? 3 more. Okay. So this time, first thing, I'll be dividing by 4 because it's in the bracket, and then I'm going to be squaring it. So when I'm working backwards, I'm going to square root both sides first, and then I'm going to times by 4. Now, when we're timesing this by 4, I'm already square rooting the y, so I cannot put that underneath my square root sign. So I put it out the front, and it's 4 root y. So it's similar notation to that we saw in surds. So n is equal to 4 times the square root of y. So we have seen that notation before. For your one, press pause, take as long as you need, then press play to see how you get on. Your one, you're dividing by 5, and then you're cubing. So you're going to take the cube root of y, and that will be left with n over 5. And then you're going to be timesing by 5 on both sides. It'll be 5 times the cube root of y is equal to n. So n equals 5 multiplied by the cube root of y. Again, just be clear that that 3 is the cube root. Okay, so it should be a smaller 3 up slightly higher. Last 2. Here, apologies, we would be adding 3 first, and then we're going to be square rooting. So when we're working backwards, we need to do the opposite, the inverse of a square root. So that's going to be to square both sides. I'm going to get y squared equals n plus 3, and then I'm going to need to take away 3 from both sides. So n is going to be y squared, take away 3. One for you to try. Again, pause the video, take as long as you need. So here, I would be taking away 2, and then I would be square rooting. So you're going to have to square both sides when you're working backwards through it, and then you're going to need to add both sides to the 2. Remembering that the 2 isn't being squared as well, okay? Because you're adding 2 to both sides after you've squared both sides. So the 2 doesn't get squared as well. Last one that we're going to try, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit more space to write this out. So here, I'm going to be square rooting first when I sub a value in for n. Then I would be adding 3. So when I work backwards, I'm going to have to take away the 3 from both sides first. Then I'm going to have to square both sides. Now, there's 2 things over there that I'm going to square. So I can't just write y squared minus 3 squared. When I'm squaring it, I treat it as if it's a bracket, and I square the entire thing, and that's going to be equal to n. So n is equal to y minus 3 all squared, because you're squaring it all together at the same time. One for you to try. Again, for the last time, please pause the video, take as long as you need. So here, I'd be square rooting, then I'd be taking away 4, so I'm going to work backwards through these to unpick it, so I'm going to have y plus 4 equals the square root of n, and then I'm going to square both sides, so it'll be y plus 4 all squared is equal to n, so n is equal to y plus 4 all squared. Now, I've got some questions for you to try on the next slide. Now, I know there's a lot there, and if you're stuck on any, please make sure you go back and rewatch them again. Now, there are 6 questions on the board just now for you to try to keep practicing this. Please make sure you're trying them just now. Press pause. And then there are another 5 on the screen for you to try now. So again, please press pause and take as long as you need to work your way through these. I have got the first 6 answers on the board just now. Again, it's crucial that you are marking to check to see how you're getting on. So please mark your answers. And then for the next 5, the answers are on the board just now. So again, vital that you're marking. Please make sure that you are marking these. If there are any that you are getting wrong, please go back and please watch the video again, and please make sure that we are correcting any mistakes. Okay, don't let these mistakes linger.